Hey, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the stream. Especially good morning to channel members who I'm sure are going to show up in the chat momentarily. Also, thank you for your patience on last week's stream. I know the audio slowly drifted out of sync over the time of the stream. I was trying a new setup with like a capture card. The setup I have is I have a Panasonic GH5, and what I'm using right now and what I've used in the past is just the I believe it's called the Lumix Tether software. So it takes the video output through a USB cable, brings it to your computer. And I was like, the resolution is only 720. Let me try a capture card to get that up to like 1080. And it was a cheap Walmart capture card. So like by the end of the stream, it looked like a bad Japanese, a bad anime dub. So let me know if there's any technical issues. I'll always try to improve the quality for you guys. And, but I'm just going to stick with what works for now until I can upgrade my setup. I need to buy a new computer. I need to get some new peripherals, but I'm kind of waiting to see where the year ends up as far as like, money wise with I've got my union, W-2 work, and I've got my 1099 like side business work. So I'm just kind of waiting to see how the numbers shake out. But all that to say, today's stream we're talking about studio calibration, room calibration, whether it's a home studio, bedroom studio, studio you've built, professional studio, big dub stage, like all the techniques to measure the room response and calibrate the levels are going to be the same. So wherever you're working, if you have studio monitors and you are mixing, or even if you're just editing sound, maybe you're a dialogue or sound effects editor, you need to have a calibrated room. You need to have the levels calibrated on your speakers. You need to make sure that the response of the room is tight and accurate, because you can't really make decisions on EQ, level, even sibilance. You can't make those choices with an uncalibrated room. And I'm guilty of this. Like whenever I move to a new space, I am so excited to just plug everything in and get to work that you really have to slow yourself down and, calibrate the room. And so we're going to talk about how to do that yourself. A very basic, simple step-by-step outline of how to do it. So let's start things off by our letter for today is R. This is, I grew up with Sesame Street, so you get this. You get Sesame Street level educational aids. And R is for room. Your room that you work in is super important. And like I've made so much money and done so many projects in just a little bedroom studio as a independent freelancer. I finally got it wasn't the chance. I just made the time to build my own studio in my backyard, which is where you guys have seen me. It's the blue walls and camo panels on the back there. Those panels I've had for, my dad helped me build them a long time ago. So it's kind of like, it's like a memento, although they do absorb some frequencies. So I've got my notes here. I actually hand wrote my notes, which you can't read. So first, the basics of why you would want to calibrate your room. If you are using your ears to make decisions on content, frequency, volume, dynamics, panning, your room needs to be calibrated. It's kind of like having bad eyesight and not wearing corrective lenses, whether they're contacts or glasses. You need to be able to see or hear clearly in order to make an informed decision. So your room needs to be calibrated for the level of like the medium you're working in. If it's film or TV, that's going to be a higher volume level calibration than if you're just doing content for web. But we're going to go through level, EQ response. We could talk a little bit about RT60. Speaker placement is super important. Then we're going to talk about the gear you need. I've got a couple visual aids. There's my trusty Radio Shack SPL meter. You can also download apps for your phone. I'll show you one that, do I still have it? I've got tuner, decibel X. Yeah. So you've got different apps you can get for your phone that will tell you volume level, and maybe like this one even does a little bit of a spectral display. So you need a way to measure. You're going to probably want a microphone if you're really doing a detailed measurement with Room EQ Wizard. This one is the Dayton Audio something. You can see it's got a serial number on there. Let me do this. It has a serial number on there so that you can load a calibration file into Room EQ Wizard so that you're dealing with a truly flat response. And then you're going to need some kind of digital audio workstation, some noise, some pink noise files, and then some kind of ability to correct for the deficiencies in your studio. No room is perfect. You'll never get your room perfect. It's always going to be a trade-off. But so the basic thing you're going to need to do first is, if you're working in stereo, you're only going to need left and right speakers. But I like to make a calibration project in whatever DAW I'm using. I'm using Pro Tools today, but if you're in Premiere or Reaper or Logic or Vegas, whatever you're using, just set up a dedicated calibration session, save it, stack it on a hard drive somewhere. So every time you move rooms or you change something in your room, you can come back to kind of check out, like, how has this change affected what my room is doing. I recommend getting this file called a Dolby Pink. If you just Google search for Dolby Pink noise, this is a file used by Dolby to calibrate rooms. It's set to -20 decibel full scale. So throw this on a bunch of mono audio tracks and then route each audio track to the speaker it needs to go to. You can see here's the center. That's just going to the center channel. And you'll complete that for each of these channels. Like this is a 5.1 room, so everything's going out. You can also just do mono sub auxes to do this. Let's see. Master Nelson says the audio sounds quieter than -31. Are you talking about on the stream? Because I can change that. That's super easy. I think output. No, I mean that's cranked up pretty high. Oh, you know what? There, try that. Sorry, I was recording some something loud. I forget, like hand claps or something like that. And so thanks. The input gain on my preamp was down, so that should be better. And check 1 2. Yeah, peaking at about -8 now, so that should be good. Okay, so thank you for letting me know about that, by the way. We've got our Dolby Pink noise in here, and then it's set to go out each channel. You could do mono auxes, you could do pan pucks, whatever you want, but you only want this noise to play out each channel. So if you solo the center channel, it's going to play out the center, and so on and so forth. If it's just stereo, do 2 mono, pan it hard left and hard right, because you're going to check the volume first to make sure that everything is gravy. Let me just go through some comments. We got a bunch of members in the chat. And just so you guys know, if you're not a channel member, we have a Discord. I've got a call coming in real quick, so I'm going to mute my mic, and I'll be right back. Yes, the wife always picks the best time to call. Okay, so now I lost my train of thought. Pink noise in there. Oh, yeah, members. So members, we have a Discord channel, which has been really cool to check in the mornings. There's all kinds of good discussion about work. And so if you haven't joined as a channel member, you can check that out. But yeah, let's just go through. We got Master Nelson, Sounds of Stories, Javier, Kevin, Marvel Studio. So congrats for making it. I'm sorry, I wasn't sure I was going to be able to stream today because I have like a consultation appointment in like it's like 2 towns over, but they rescheduled, so I'm glad I can be here with you guys this morning. Okay, so I'm going to get to actual levels and stuff, but just for like the technical setup, the gear that you'll need, I showed you the SPL meter, calibration mic. Yeah, maybe not. You can just use your phone. Just make sure you have an SPL meter to do a basic level calibration. So get the pink noise in there, route it, and then you can solo each channel and set the actual pot, the potentiometer on your studio monitor to read at the level you're calibrating your room at. Before you do that, crank your monitor level on your interface up all the way 100%. What you want to do is have the monitor level on your audio interface maxed out, like all the way up, so that when you crank that bad boy all the way up, it is at level. And then you can obviously take it down for like web content, but the maximum level on your audio interface should be your calibrated level. It's a hard stop. You're going to turn it up and it's going to stop, and that is 82, 85, 79, 76, whatever you calibrate your room to. Now, what level do you pick calibrating your room to? That is so personal and so specific to each room. My room is about 200 square feet, so it's a small space. It's not tiny, but it's small, but it's got high ceilings. In the center of the peak, it's about 13 feet, I think, from floor to ceiling. So it's got a nice cathedral ceiling, so the sound can go up and propagate a little bit. And I designed it that way on purpose so that I could have a higher monitor level and have a little bit better frequency response without that parallel ceiling and floor mode that you get. It's like usually 70 to 80 hertz. So my room sounds good at 82. 85 starts to be uncomfortable, especially because I'm only about 4 feet back from the 8-inch monitors I'm using. Most bedroom studios, I recommend you start at 79 decibels. You want to do a C-weighted, let's see if the batteries are even good on this. So on my Radio Shack meter, what I do is I take it down to 80, and then you've got a response button here. So the response you want to be slow, and the weighting you want to be C. So there's A and there's C on this. And whatever app you're using or hardware device, just make sure it's decibel C weighted, and then it's slow response. And then the microphone actually aims at the source. Some people will put it up, facing straight up, and some calibration mics, they tell you to do that. I just aim it right at each speaker from the head position. So you'll put this on a stand, a mic stand, or if you're using your phone, you can even just hold it right where your head in the mix position is going to be. Play back the Dolby Pink at -20 decibels, and make sure the monitor level on your interface is all the way up, and then turn up the volume on each monitor. You test them one at a time, so left first, then right, then center, then surrounds and LFE, and set the level on the monitor until your calibration device, your SPL meter, reads 82 decibels C weighted or 79 decibels C weighted. Set them all, just set everything the same to start with. You can do plus 10 dB on the subwoofer, but that can get you into trouble. Like small rooms especially, the bass is always weird. So what I suggest doing is do that calibration. Try 79 to start with if you're in a standard home studio. And then what I've done, some of these files have like died because I have moved so many times, but I've got a mix print master here that I mixed in a big dub stage. And then I'll just play this back in the room and see how it sounds. Like, does it sound like I remember it sounding when I mixed it? if you don't have that, the next best thing you can do is rip a DVD, not download it from like you know, a torrent seeding site, but actually get a burner and rip the audio, the Dolby audio from the DVD. This is 28 Days Later, which is one of my favorite films. It's probably the best zombie film ever made. But you can also check Netflix. Netflix on Google Chrome has an extension to play 5.1 out your audio interface. So I've watched Band of Brothers in my room, Saving Private Ryan, like all the standard kind of test files that I like to listen to. You can just stream it off Netflix in your studio if you're on a Mac. I think you could probably do it with a PC too, but you'll need to install an extension. I've got other stuff that I mixed that I've lost the files to, which is really sad, and I didn't save the videos. But you want to have some kind of reference mix to listen. I've also got some music tracks in here. I've got Angel by Massive Attack, which has excellent low end. And then I've got Deacon Blues from, if anybody knows the artist for Deacon Blues off the top of their head, please let me know. That'll be our little quiz for the day. So those are 2 music calibration tracks that I'll listen to. So set the levels on your monitors. Make sure the interface is all the way up so that the top level is your calibrated, you know, 82 or 79. And then play stuff in the room and see, like, does it sound comfortable level? Does it, if you have something previous that you've mixed or you've heard in like a calibrated dub stage, does it sound like you remember? Pay close attention to the high end, the low end, the overhead, meaning when stuff gets loud or your speaker's getting crunchy, or are they able to produce the full transient? And yeah, or check Amazon, Netflix, like just pick stuff that you're familiar with, you like the way it sounds, because calibration can also be kind of personal. A perfectly flat room may not sound good to you, but a perfectly flat room or close to perfectly flat room will help you make informed mix decisions. So after you've got the levels set up, good, Steven knows the artist, it's Steely Dan. After you have the levels, the next step is to check the frequency response of the room and see how flat the room is. You'll see discussions on forums or Facebook groups or just audio nerd collections where there's audio nerds in an area and they gather and they start talking about their ability to grow beards and their love for IPAs and how hard it is to find a woman. But they'll also talk about things like room calibration and flat frequency response, flat rooms. So there's a piece of software you can use. Let me pull that up, Jamie, here. And I don't have a Jamie, you know, like I have me. So it's called Room EQ Wizard. And this is the next step for figuring out where your room is at. Yeah, Apple TV also streams 5.1. So yeah, you could use the levels from streaming a show. The problem is that the player will have a volume level. And yeah, there's a lot of knobs to twist. Like you've got your interface, you've got the speakers, you have a volume slider in Netflix. So yeah, just be cautious about that. Like make sure everything is at 0. Just go through some other questions real quick. Okay, so that was that one. I found Netflix levels can be inconsistent. Yeah, they can be. I mean, really anything can be inconsistent because you have a person mixing it. So yeah. Anyways, Room EQ Wizard is a great piece of software for really figuring out like where your room is at. You can download this for free, it costs $0. If you want it to be a real accurate measurement, you will need a calibration mic. So I think this one was like $100. You can also just use whatever mic you have in your studio, but like this mic isn't voiced perfectly flat. So, and that's the point of doing this, is to figure out where where stuff is. So this is a Dayton Audio. This is, $100. I know there's the U mic, and there's other calibration mics. They generally don't sound good. They sound flat, and they're like, this one's pretty noisy. There's a lot of hiss to it, but the benefit of getting a calibration mic is it will have an individual calibration file that you load into Room EQ Wizard, and then when you sweep the room, it'll calibrate the signal with those filters corrected. You can also figure out the correction filters needed for an audio interface. They're generally not very big because the audio interfaces tend to be pretty flat. But in Room EQ Wizard, what you'll do is you will go to Measure, and we're going to do sweeps. You can see this is me talking here, so it's already picking up signal on here. And you start the frequency. I like to do 0 to 20,000. So full range at -20. And this is going to play a sine wave sweep that's going to then give you like kind of a snapshot of your room with all kinds of different information for you to parse. So I'm not going to do this because it's really loud and really annoying. You'll really want to do this for each speaker. And you can see I've got different speakers here, center, left, LFE, all that. So you'll want to do this for each speaker that you have to see where it's at. This is after you calibrate the levels to, 82 or 79. And what will happen is it will show you, let me see which one of these was the October 4th, November 5th. Hey, I did this. Oh yeah, this was my studio in a different town. Okay, so that's November 5th. So I think October 3rd, it looks like. October 4th. Let's do, and then I had a tilt one that I did. October 6th, here we go. So October 6th looks like. So what you'll get is you'll get a little graph. All these different tabs will tell you there's SPL and phase, distortion, impulse, filtered. Like most of these I don't really look at. I look at RT60. And does this even oh, that's the average. Let's look at the left channel. Okay, so there's the RT60. And you've got decay. You can do a waterfall diagram, which always looks cool. Like this is all stuff that the nerds love. They love posting this kind of stuff. But the most important thing is SPL and phase. Just for figuring out like frequency response. So you can change the scale here. You want to blow it up pretty good. This, not the phase. Really, SPL would probably be enough. Okay, so this, you can see like the low end here is kind of where you want to look the most. And I tuned this room to be a little bit bright because I do a lot of dialogue editing. So you can see like the low end here is, it's moderately flat. Like there's probably, I think I did this at like 85, and you can see it'll go down to like 78, and this little spike here is up around 93. So it's within like 6 dB of being pretty flat, maybe 7 dB. But there's like a pretty big shelf here comparatively, and I did that because I really like to hear all the ticks and pops and detail that, like, when it goes to a dub stage, maybe that won't be as much of an issue, but a lot of the content we mix might go to a theater, but really where it's going to find its audience and live is it's going to be in people's houses. And with TV speakers, whether it's a sound bar or like just the built-in speakers, they tend to be really bright because there's not a ton of low end. So I want to have a pretty flat low end, but in my particular instance, I wanted to make sure that the high end didn't roll off too much. So you can see like it's got a pretty good, showing in like the mid and upper mids. So basically, like what you do is you get this reading and then you can start to see where corrections are needed. So most of the issue for studios tends to be like in the bass area. So like this goes down to 37 hertz, but like maybe let's say like 50 hertz to like 300 hertz is where you get the big audible peaks and dips. So the best way to deal with these, which will be the next thing we talk about, is like the process of correcting this stuff. But in Room EQ Wizard, make sure you check each one of your speakers, and then if you do a 5.1, you can actually get an average, which will average all the speakers. And this is kind of like, you know, taking all 6 speakers, smushing them together, and you can see my room is fairly flat. Like if we're going at this, like I probably had the test tone a little bit too high, but that's like 88. So I've got a dip here that goes down to 82, and I've got this goes up to 94. So let's say +4 and -6. So that's a great, if you're within 6 dB of baseline, you're good. Like you can stop treating the room. It's fine. Here's the LFE channel. You can see I've got +10 dB of inline gain on it. And it goes down to 35. It starts to roll off around 35 hertz. So, and then I've got the crossover set to where like 125, you know, it really stops. There's a nice, probably 12 dB per octave filter on it. So these are the surround speakers. They obviously are bass deficient because they're smaller speakers. They're 6-inch speakers. So yeah, get the average of your room. And then the next thing you'll want to look at is correcting this, because you've got your levels. You know where the EQ of your room is at. You could look at the RT60, which is like the decay time for the like how long it takes the signal to decay in the room, basically reverb, which you can also do with a clap test. Just clap your hands and kind of hear. And let's just look at these real quick, just so we can check out. So my whole room is under like 600 milliseconds. What you'll generally see, this ringing, I don't know what this was. This was some weird stuff that happened. Maybe a bird or something. But, and then the average doesn't, for whatever reason. So you want to get, especially these bass frequencies, down under 1 second. Really, under 500 milliseconds is great, but that's really hard to do unless you have a lot of bass traps. So, like, try to get the RT60 down manageable. Try to get the frequency response to be within, you know, like 6 dB of flat. And now we can kind of talk about like how you would do that in your room. So let me look at my notes and just make sure. Let me actually go through some questions too. Okay, could use the levels. Yeah, we talked about that. Do you take the X curve into consideration? I don't. I stopped caring about that a long time ago. And I know some other mixers who don't really look at that either anymore. So it's just kind of a thing that's become antiquated, like obsolete. Okay, that's a good question. I think I handled all the other questions. Oh yeah, we got Paul. Paul joined us. And then Hoob the Noob, Bill, Shup. So thank you to channel members. You guys are, I always say, you guys are the ones keeping the channel going, and it's absolutely true. Okay, so we talked about SPL, Room EQ Wizard, Calibration Mic, Process, Pink Noise, and Pro Tools. So you run a sweep in Room EQ Wizard, and it kind of tells you this information, the frequency response, and the RT60 decay time. So now once you know like what the problems are, you can start to figure out how you want to tackle the problems in your room. I will tell you, from setting up multiple studios and helping, you know, treat studios and moving around and having different home studios and tuning theaters and all this, the big issues you'll find are excessive decay times, meaning there's too much reverb, especially low frequency reverb, like 50 to 100 hertz, really tough to account for. And then The next thing that you run into is like standing waves or modes or nodes, whatever they're called. Basically, frequency cancellation in the lows and low mids. And what happens with frequency cancellation is the sound goes from the speaker and it hits something else before it hits your ear. So it bounces off the ceiling, it bounces off the wall, it bounces off the floor. And it's, if you've ever played Pong and you have the two Pong things and the Pong puck or ball, whatever, goes back and forth, that's what the sound is doing in your room. There's no way around it. The only way to sort of tame that and tamp it down a little bit is to do treatment of your room. And there's SonarWorks, there's Dirac, there's all kinds of different softwares that people try to sell you to, calibrate your room and use software. Like, just give us $500 and we'll fix it for you. It's just $500. It's all we're asking. Just give us your money. And you know me, I don't like that. I'm not here to shill stuff and sell you guys things. Don't do that. Fix it your damn self. Get you some lumber, get you some insulation, get you some fabric, and build your own panels. I'll show you. This studio is a mess. And warts and all, I'll just show you, like, I think I can tilt this over here. So there's the wall of shame with guitars and everything. Those are 2x4s, and they are filled with insulation that I got from Home Depot. And it's got some gray fabric from Walmart. It's not artistic. It's not like, I could have spent more time on it, but it's me here working by myself. I just wanted something that I could build and tune the room with. And my total cost for all the acoustic treatment in here, I've got a cloud. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 big wall panels, like 8 foot by 4 foot wall panels stuffed full of insulation. And then I've got my thinner ones that are for more of like high frequencies on the back, the camo ones. Full in cost to put all this stuff together was probably a couple $100, maybe like $200-300. So half the price of that software. And the nice thing is the room sounds good. Like, I'm not having to run software on my computer to make it sound good. I can bring instruments in here and record. I can record a voice. It sounds flat. It sounds pretty dead, but not so dead that it's uncomfortable. It sounds like you're in a vacuum. It's open because the ceilings are high. So the panels I'm using, that's a good question. They're rock wool. Always stick with mineral wool or rock wool, it's called. Let me see if I need my Jamie here to pull this up. Let me go to Home Depot and I'll show you the stuff that you can get. Can you guys see this? I bet you can't because you're on my ugly mug. Okay, Home Depot. So mineral wool. Mineral wool is great because it doesn't have the nasty fiberglass, itchy stuff. So I usually tell people to get this rock wool Safe and Sound. But sometimes you have to go to Ace or a different place to get it. Sometimes it's not carried or they got to special order it and you have to pay extra. So the other one you can get is this Owens Corning Thermafiber, and you want to get the, I think the R23, it's the stuff that's not for 16-inch studs. It's actually 24-inch studs, because you have to do less cutting, 5.5 by 15. So find the stuff that's like 20, it'd be like 22 inches wide so that you're not having to cut. I don't know what that is in, oh wow, this is R30. That's cool. But the Thermafiber, the Owens Corning Thermafiber, or the Rockwool Comfort Bats, or Safe and Sound are like the 3 products you can get locally, and you just drive it doesn't even have to be a truck. You could drive your Civic down there and shove 2 in the back, and then get a couple 2x4s and frame it up, stuff it in there, staple some fabric, staple the fabric around the back so you can't see the staples. And the cool thing about that is you can move them around the room and use them almost like gobos, so that, like, I'm not getting, then you re-spike the room in Room EQ Wizard, see where it's at, what your corrections have done, and you can see I've got different things, and I tried to label them. Like, I added 2 side traps, and I had some ghetto traps at the studio. in the other town that I had. I moved the desk forward. To like try to label the calibrations what you did so you can look back and compare and see where it's at. But it's really trial and error for the common studio issues, which is the excessive bass RT 60 times, like 1 second or so more of resonance down here in the bass frequencies, and the dips in the actual like some studios will have. Let me open up the one I had. I think, let me just open this one. Okay, so you can start to see, like, this is a bigger dip here. That's an average, so let me find some really bad stuff where it's like super disgusting. Okay, this has a good dip right here. This is a real common dip. It's usually between 70 and 80 hertz. And this is caused by a low ceiling, meaning like 7, 8, 8.5 foot ceiling. What happens is the sound comes out of the speakers. It hits the floor or ceiling first, depending on how high your speakers are. And it bounces back and forth between the floor and ceiling. And that bounce actually creates a phase cancellation in this specific frequency range. It's like 70 to 80 hertz. And a cloud above the mix position will help account for that. The other thing that'll help correct for that is actually moving your mix position forward or back. And you can actually hear where it's canceling by going back into your DAW and playing a signal generator, which I'll bring over here, and just start to move this frequency around. What'll happen is, like, look at Room EQ Wizard and say, okay, this is at 79.8 hertz. It's actually a little bit lower than that, 79.5 hertz. So then type that into your frequency generator and play the sine wave through your speakers and start to move your head around, and you'll hear exactly where it cancels. And so you want to get out of that spot. That's a cheap way to correct for bad bass or phase canceling bass, is just move your mix position around. You can also move the speakers against the wall, but it's not going to correct for ceiling and floor. So yeah, let's see. Missed all of what was said as an ad came in. We're just talking about how to correct for this super common dip in like the 70 to 90 hertz range, which is a floor to ceiling reflection. This was at an old studio I had. A cloud over the mix position is going to help. Moving your mix position further back into the room or further forward. But basically you want to set up a signal generator in Pro Tools at that frequency and start moving your head or moving your speakers to get rid of that cancellation. Yeah, so 4-inch thickness on the panels. It's way better to go too thick on the panels and have too much absorption than it is to have like 2-inch panels. The 2-inch panels are only gonna suck up like down to 300 hertz or so. So it's really for like the mids or mid bass, people will call it. 4-inch is great, 6-inch is better. And the other thing that's really great is actually popping them off the wall or making corner traps. So the 2 corner traps I have up front are actually at like a 45-degree angle, meaning the wall is here and I've got the trap like this to create a little air pocket behind it. So the bass frequencies will go in and they just get sucked up. They just end up disappearing. And like, it's so much cheaper to do that yourself than pay somebody to do it, or worse yet, pay, for the, I'm not going to name the brands, but the super expensive multi-$100 individual bass traps. You can also use these tubular, they're like foam tubes, they're giant foam tubes. And I know this sound designer had a bunch in her studio, and they seem to work really good. And those you can make look cool. Like, they kind of look like modern art. I forget what they were, but they're basically tube traps, but they're like carpet rolls or some other weird thing that are just really thick and soak up the bass. So step by step, we talked about calibrating levels. We talked about microphone, a calibration mic, or an SPL meter, or using your phone as an SPL meter. and getting the levels set, and then going into room EQ Wizard, sweeping the room and figuring out what kind of frequency dips you're dealing with. In the RT60, let's look at the RT60 of this room that I had. I remember it was pretty, yeah, this is getting close to a second in the base frequencies. It's like 800 milliseconds. So then after you do that and you build some absorption for your room, then you can remeasure and see like how much better is it after your treatment. It should be quite a bit better. And also you can use a signal generator in Pro Tools or any DAW to kind of listen for where the cancellation. A lot of times the cancellation happens right in the middle of the room. So, you know, moving your mix position slightly left, slightly right, or forward or back will help get rid of that cancellation. And this stuff is super boring, and it will annoy your housemates, whether they're family or friends or roommates. Like, they're going to be pissed off because you're going to be playing signals and like sweeps and pink noise, and it's just going to sound like a bunch of avant-garde noise, which it is. But like after you get stuff kind of dialed in, there's also the option to use software to correct for especially delay, speaker delay. There's going to be slight variation in speaker times, but what I suggest you do, let me see if I got a spare cable here. Oh, this is super old school. This is a Firewire cable. It's I think 6-footer. Yeah, it's a 6-footer. So you can take a cable and put it on your nose or your ear or forehead, whatever, and just like you would mic in a drum kit for overheads, to make sure that the overheads are equidistant. Like this snare is right in the middle of the overheads. Take the cable or measuring tape, string, whatever you got, and just measure it to the center of either the woofer or the tweeter, and just go around to each speaker and make sure that they're equidistant. And you shouldn't really have any delay time issues with that. Like maybe a millisecond or two, but nothing. It shouldn't really affect your mix. It's when you get speakers that are like 10 feet versus 7 feet that you end up with a bunch of issues. So you can use software to correct for that. What I do is I just have gotten my room really flat and the speakers where I want them, and I'm not running any software correction at all. It's a flat room. I've taken mixes from here to dub stages. They translate really well. So to me, like once I get to that point, I'm not going to mess with it anymore. So let's see, other questions we have. Have you ever built membrane or wood panel bass traps? No. I want to. I didn't need to. Like once I got the, you know, cheapo lumber and fabric traps up, the room here was flat. It was done. So once it was done, it's like time to get to work. I'm not gonna, you know, just sit here and tweak it, because you can tweak stuff till you die, and you'll never get it perfect. There's always going to be something. Marful Studio says, I have reasonably good frequency response, but I have a huge dip at 2K. I haven't figured out what's causing it. I would say it's probably a desk, or it could be your monitors, not your studio monitors, but your like actual displays. They do weird stuff, and it's just a necessary evil. Like, we got to look at what we're doing. So you might try like raising them or lowering them or angling them. But it could also be like, it could be your microphone. It could be something in the room. Yeah. Those higher frequency dips are not as big of an issue because they tend to be pretty tight cues. And so your ear just compensates for it. What are your recommendations for windows and doors? You can do a window plug. I've done that. What you do is you measure the dimensions of the window and you cut the lumber to fit perfectly in the frame. You do a plywood face on it that is wider than the window, and then stuff it full of insulation and just seal it up. But that's extremely depressing because the little, you know, view you have out into the real world while you're slogging away in your edit or mix bay is completely gone, and you're just in a box, and that's terrible. I will always prefer to have the window be a window and not just this plugged up block. Even if the frequency response isn't as good, just for my own sanity, to remind myself that there is a real world out there and I'm not just trapped in this little dark room with Pro Tools all day. So I am, but at least I can see stuff happening outside and know that there is some joy left in the world. So I would say if you have a lot of windows, plug them, frame it out, insulate, plywood or drywall. Drywall is great. Do 5/8 drywall or 2 layers of drywall. You can go the whole, green glue and hocus pocus magic spell if you want. But like just some basic, construction stuff is usually enough to get it done. And let's see. Yeah, so those are good questions. Let me see what else on my list here. Size. Why did I do size? Oh, the size of the material. Yeah, thicker is almost always better. You can't absorb too much. I had one home studio that the room was such a weird shape that I just covered the entire room with absorption, and it was like walking into a coffin. Like you would just walk in there and it was just completely dead, and it wasn't very fun to work in that environment. But yeah, it was just rough. So Steve George says healthy work environment is very important. Hans Meyer says I go from my audio interface to a monitor controller. I wouldn't do it that way. Because if you have the monitor controller all the way up in the interface volume controls to adjust the desired level, no, you don't want to do it that way. What you should do is turn the audio interface all the way up. Turn the interface all the way up. If the monitor controller has decibel levels, just set that to 82 or 79. But if it's just a knob, I would turn that all the way up too. And that way you're starting with zeroed out levels from the interface to the controller, and then adjust the levels on your speakers so that as a safety, you're never going to go over 82 or 85. Like set the knobs all the way up, and then that's your top shelf. You're never going to go over that. If you need to dim it down, you have a dim button, or you can use the knob to take it down to 76, 75, whatever. But what you don't want to get into is a situation where you can crank it up to like 100 and damage your speakers or damage your hearing. That would be terrible. So max everything up except for the knobs on the speakers, set the speaker level, and then you can back down on the monitor controller and don't touch the interface after that. Do you calibrate the timing between your video monitor and audio monitor? Yes, that is another good thing. We could call that part of our calibration because lip sync is super important. So there's two things that you'll want for that. This app is called, whoa. I want to show you like the actual app. I mean, it's just a blank. Let me do this one. This is called Catch and Sync. I'll show you what the icon looks like. So it's a video and audio recording application. What you do is you record the video with a beep, a two pop, boop, that kind of deal. And you record the video and audio, and then you slide around on here to figure out where the offset in Pro Tools should be. And then in Pro Tools, you go here with the information you've gotten from this app, and you go to Video Sync Offset. And the cool thing is in the later versions of Pro Tools, you can do it by quarter frames or milliseconds. So mine is 70 milliseconds. And yeah, and then you should be in perfect sync. Then you want to go back and recheck it with the two pop and make sure that it is in sync. And yeah, that's really important if you're working with film and TV stuff. Okay, so Kevin Ty says, do you still recommend using the ATSC 85 speech file? I've never used it. I might have recommended it because it sounded like a good idea. But yeah, I don't. Maybe I've never listened to it. I probably should. Maybe I can find it really quick. Because yeah, let's see. ATSC speech. It should be ATSC 85. Ugh, Reddit. Not gonna go on there. That place is trash. Okay, that's that. French translation. I don't see it on here, man. I think it probably exists somewhere. But yeah, I'm not gonna go on Reddit at all, so I'm not clicking that. Maybe it'd be like, it should be a WAV file, I would think. Thank you for your patience while I check this out. Ugh, yeah, I just can't go on Reddit, so I'm not going to go there. But yeah, I would say if it's at -24, it's probably fine to use, but it's kind of tough because it might be too loud to you, or it might be too quiet. So that's why using pink noise is good, because the goal with calibrating the level of your studio is to have it, before you even open Isotope, Insight, or Ulian loudness meter, or whatever you're using to meter your volume, you want the room to be comfortable to work in at the calibrated level and be able to make subjective volume decisions based on that level. And people have different frequency response to their ears, and they also have different comfort levels for working at different volumes. Like me, I'm comfortable working at probably louder volumes than most people, and I like doing that, even though it is damaging my hearing, but I like being able to hear the detail of stuff, especially when dialogue editing. So I might play that file and say, you know what, it's great, it sounds fine. And for you, it might be too loud. So you do want to make sure that the kind of final step for room calibration is to actually do work in your room and, you know, pull up Insight while you're working. Have this tiny. You can just do this, turn all these off, and just have the levels there. Or you can use Ulian loudness meter. Or if you're in Premiere, you know, there's like a loudness thing there. And just have this up while you're working. And work for, you know, if you're doing a mix for like a couple hours without really looking at this, and then bring it up and measure what you've done. The goal with your room calibration is whatever format you're delivering, whether it's TV or film or music, you want to have it to where you're not really having to rely on meters, you're just relying on your ears. So if you've worked for a couple hours on a sequence or a show or whatever at your calibrated level, and you bring this up and the integrated level is -24 and that's your delivery spec, you're gold. Your room is calibrated and you can just never touch that volume again unless you're watching a YouTube video or something that's super loud. If you find that you've worked for a couple hours and this integrated level is low, then that means you're monitoring too high. And if this integrated level is too high, then it means you're monitoring too low, because you're, you know, it's uncomfortably loud, so you're bringing stuff down. So you can use this as kind of a final check. Work at your calibrated level and see where that gets you as far as your spec. Are you close to spec? Are you spot on? The whole goal with this is to not have to rely on this and just zip this out of the way, and really only reference it for like super loud sequences or super soft sequences, just to see kind of where it's at. But you should get to the point where you trust your room and you trust your ears enough to mix without looking at the meters. And that's kind of the whole goal with calibration, is to just get it to where you're not relying on plugins and tools to tell you where you're at, but you can actually just mix and not think about it and just focus on what's happening on screen. Okay, so Other questions, I'll just go through these because I kind of covered everything I wanted to do. If anybody have a good recommendation for an audio interface for up to 1.5 grand? For that level, it depends on what you want to do. Do you need to record a bunch of microphones? I know the Audient Aurea, I think it's called, is supposed to be really good, and it's set up for Atmos, so that's one I've been looking at. I would check that one out. I would check out the Focusrites and Apollos and RME Fireface, like, or whatever it's called. It's probably not Fireface anymore. Those are usually good third-party ones. Okay. Oh yeah, the Wayback Machine won't load with my browser. That's because the internet's being scrubbed. All the stuff, all the information that we used to be able to look up is going away. And it's just going to be approved information that has been fact-checked and approved by the powers that be. So all that like historical internet stuff, it's all getting smoked. It's going to be gone. Yes, Alexander says, I've heard that for monitor calibration, room size is a factor and distance from your monitors to your listening position as well. Small studio, something closer to 76 dB is better. I've found that my room is big enough where that's too low. I've got to be at 82 to hit spec. But that's why I said, like, calibrate your room and then mix something and see, without looking at the meters, what feels right to you. If 76 and you're hitting minus 24 and that's the world you're working in, you're good, you know, but you might find that it needs to be louder or quieter. Brandon says, how does mixing for different levels, TV, web, impact your calibration decision? All it really does for me is make me turn my monitors down on my interface, which is just this cheapo Focusrite Scarlett 18920. You can actually set the dim amount. So I can dim it 10 dB or 15 dB if I want. And for a web mix that is delivering at minus 16, that's 8 dB lower than minus 24. I find that 10 dB down is good because it simulates more of like a smartphone or TV. So yeah, just taking the calibration down, you know, for web stuff, like turn your monitors down and then turn it back up for TV or film. So that's a good question. I use the Apollo X whatever for 5.1. X8 goes up to 7.1, but for anything up to 5.1, Apollo X6. Oh, X6. Okay. Cool. Yeah, the Apollo stuff is good. It's just like the Apple stuff. Like it's expensive and it just works and it's shiny gray. So I've heard great things about them. It's just like certain people, like I'll stereotype them as being Apollo users. Like they're usually the they're the people running Logic usually. But Pro Tools users will use them too. So yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, I think I covered everything. Let me just consult my binder here. Yeah, it's so closing thoughts. It's really important to have your room calibrated, and there's so many different ways you can do it. It's not dependent on your software. You don't have to buy software to calibrate your room. You can literally do it with a microphone, speakers, and some material from Home Depot. And yeah, it's not that hard to do. There's a lot of, I know I was kind of all over the place on the stream, but there's a lot of like super technical math that people will talk about for figuring out standing waves and room modes and like all these. I'm a plus and minus math guy. Like anything with letters integrated with the numbers is over my head. So I like just a practical, like run a signal sweep, clap my hands, walk the room, you know, play signals out of the speakers to kind of like practically troubleshoot the issue versus, you know, doing all these maths and writing on a calculator and consulting theorems and formulas online. Like just get Room EQ Wizard, get a microphone, get you an SPL app or, you know, hardware one. You can probably find these on eBay for $20 kajillion now. And measure your room, get it up to spec, get the levels set, make sure you're checking the RT60 decay time. and the SPL, the frequency response, and try to get it as flat as possible, because your mixes will sound so much better, whether you're doing film, TV, web, music, ASMR videos, whether you're trying to be a YouTube influencer, streaming, like anything. A good room is just going to help your stuff sound so much better. So yeah, what I'd like to do for the next week or so is let's have a discussion on the member Discord about room setups and calibration. I'd love to see pictures of your guys' studios. So any members, I'll do a post on there, like, let's see where you're working this week, just to kind of share more information on how we calibrate things. And I'd also love to hear people's DIY solutions to the common room problems, like low ceilings or parallel walls, or even environmental noise. Like here, this is a backyard studio, so I can hear, a neighbor's dog every once in a while. There's like, if you have a home studio, you might hear your kids or your spouse. So it's really good to hear all this information from you guys, and I will continue to try to share the little bit that I know. So thank you guys for joining the stream, and I'll see you next week. So take care till then. Goodbye.